Hey, thank you so much for joining us today on Living in Color, Real Talk for Black women and women of color. I'm your host, Erica Joy Schultz, and today we are going to be talking about traveling. More specifically, traveling on a budget. Let's get it. So, I daydream a lot, and one of the main daydreams that I noticed that I have is jet setting. I mean, going from here to there and everywhere, and not necessarily by myself. Um, my daughter's getting older, so I'm not sure how feasible this will be, um, unless my manifestations for the kind of finances I need come to pass sooner than later. But one of my um, goals is to be able to take her places and show her the world, and for us to kind of have some of those experiences together. I also want to be able to just take off by myself and, go sit on the beach somewhere and sip on a cocktail while I enjoy the sights. Um, I even have Pinterest boards, um, one specifically for dream places that I want to go to, and one for solo traveling, places that are good for solo traveling, which I'll get into that in another episode. But the main thing that always comes to mind is how to get it done financially. Um, I've determined to make some goals for myself over the next couple of years, and I've got some places that I want to go. So when I started looking into, um, you know, how to make that happen, being single, being a mother of a teenager, um, not yet having multiple streams of income, working on it and speaking it into existence. Um, but basically, how to get it done. And I wrote down, I still write, yes, pen and paper. I do use my phone for some notes, but I'm old school and I like to write things down. But I wrote some things down to go with my travel goals. And some of the tips that I found for myself, I thought would be good to share with you. So let's talk about how we're going to travel on a budget. Now, the first step to traveling on a budget is planning. And if anybody listening really knows me, you know that this is my jam right here. Okay. Um, I plan to be spontaneous. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Um, and when I'm talking about planning, I'm not necessarily talking about your itinerary, planning it hour by hour, um, but more so the overall itinerary, meaning on this particular trip that you're trying to go to, okay? Um, how many destinations or stops are you making in this one trip? Um, if you're going to multiple destinations and stops, how long are you going to be in each place? How many flights are you going to need to get to where you're going and back? Unless you get somewhere and you decide that's where you're going to stay, which I've seen it happen. Not personally, but in some blogs and things that I've read. And then, of course, your accommodations, you know, where you're staying, how you're going to be living it up. And then overall, in that goal to planning that trip, you probably want to have a goal of the type of budget that you want to maintain during your planning phase. Um, because it's one thing to go into and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, this, that, and the other. And then you wind up, planning a trip that's $5,000, $10,000 more than what you wanted to spend or what you're capable of spending. So, you know, part of it is being realistic and part of it is in the planning. You got to find that balance. I don't know about you, but I get really excited for my trips when I start looking at all the things to do, the places, the sites, and that's part of traveling on a budget too. Um, Researching free offerings to the places that you're going. It doesn't always have to be where you're adding on activities for a few $100s a pop or per day or whatever the case may be. Most places, or at least a lot of places that you go, are going to have free things that you can take advantage of and enjoy. Free walking tours, which personally I think would be kind of cool because when I go places, I kind of like to get off of the resort life and get into the culture and see the people and things like that. That's always kind of interesting to me. Um, some places will have museums, that you can go to at no charge. Hikes that you can go on if you're into that kind of thing. For me, it depends on my mood. So, well, you probably want to keep that in mind for your trip too. What kind of mood you might want to be in? Do you feel like working and exercising, or do you want to sit back and maybe be a little gluttonous? Maybe a little mixture of both. The other thing is, and this is one thing that I am implementing now, is starting to save now. Um, it's I don't know how some of these bloggers do it. I don't know what they're doing and if what they're saying is 100% true. And if you're a travel blogger and you do and have traveled literally for free, like some articles that I read, please feel free to reach out and let me know how this is done because I can't see how you can literally have no money and go travel. Because especially if you're traveling abroad, you gotta have money to get there at least. So, at a minimum, you want to start saving for your transportation to and from, I would think. Um, you want to start putting a little to the side each week, bi weekly, um, maybe try to make a little cash, um, extra cash outside of the 9 to 5 that you might have. Right now I DoorDash. Um, I do that mostly though because I'm trying to pay down some debts, like my car, which is getting ready to go to my soon to be 16-year-old. At the time of this recording, she's actually turning 16 2 days from now. So, um, I'm trying to, um, or at least I'm using my door dashing to pay down debts like that. But once that's done, I'll be able to turn that side gig into um, a vehicle to start saving and putting money to the side for my trip to Bora Bora or Barbados or the Maldives, wherever I decide to go. Um, the other thing that we want to look at, which I kind of considered being a duh tip, but Maybe some people may not think of this because generally when you go somewhere, you want to go when it's the best time of the year, right? Um, at that place. So you can enjoy all the things that there are to enjoy. So, timing. But when you're traveling on a budget, traveling off season is the way to go. And traveling off season doesn't necessarily mean going when, it's torrential weather or it's super cold or anything like that. Um, you want to definitely start with researching, of course, the best times for where you want to go. For example, I really do want to go to Bora Bora. Um, that's one of the places that ugh, I don't even know if I want to take anybody. That might be something I want to do on my own. But I've never been there. I don't know anything about that area. So when it starts getting time that I'm like, yes, I've got some cheese in the bank. I'm ready to start putting this goal, putting some action behind this goal. I'm going to start looking and see what the best times to go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go slightly before or slightly after because two reasons. Hotel accommodations are generally less expensive, and airline tickets are generally less expensive. Oh, three reasons. And when you go off season, there's not as many people. So if you're like me, you can minimize the peopling you have to do. You're welcome. The other thing when it comes to timing is flight deals. This is one that I need to get better on because I'm not real familiar with it at all. When you're talking about flight deals, um, apparently there's a rule of thumb. This is what I read. Um, when I started seeing what steps I would need to take in order to start planning for the trips that I want to take in the next couple of years. But apparently, the rule of thumb is if you're wanting to travel domestically, you want to book a month in advance. If you want to travel internationally, you want to book 2 months in advance. And generally, you're getting better flight rates. Um, Unless, of course, you're trying to travel over major holidays or something like that. And then I think you're probably going to pay what you're going to pay. Um, the other thing that I read, which kind of like punched me in the gut, was if you see a deal and you've done pricing comparison, jump on the deal even if you don't feel ready. And I'm like, oh, but if you're doing this right and you've started saving, and by the time you're really looking at flights, you should have a little bit of cheese that you can at least book your flight, right? So I guess in hindsight of reading that, it's not too crazy for the planning. I don't know. What do you guys think? I also have heard that people say, oh, if you buy your plane tickets on a Tuesday or a Monday or some random day of the week like that, apparently tickets are cheaper. For all my travel aficionados, is that true? Do you have any tips that you would like to share with the Living Color community on best times to buy flight tickets, flight tickets, plane tickets? If so, give me a holler at my email or leave me a voice message here on the podcast, and I'd love to share it with everyone. Now, the last two things are really where I was concerned with traveling on a budget because I'm not trying to stay in no roach motel um just to go somewhere that I want to go. I want to be comfortable in getting in the bed in the evening after a day full of hiking and museums and free walking tours. You know what I'm saying? I want to feel comfortable with getting in the shower without wearing shower shoes because I'm afraid of catching athlete's foot or something crazy. So, accommodations um, is really important. And I've heard about a couple of these, but I've never taken an advantage of any of them yet. For example, Airbnbs. Everybody knows about that, right? Um, I think that out of this list, that would probably be the way I would prefer to go would be an Airbnb. Okay, if they're available where I'm trying to go. Um, the other, which is not similar, but I've heard of and I know that people use, are hostels. Now, okay, this is crazy, right? But every time I hear hostels, I think of that horror movie Hostel where like all these people were getting like chopped up and stuff. So I I hear hostels and I'm like, hell nah. But apparently, um, hostels are really cool and really affordable for traveling. Um, I'm only throwing this in here because I thought it was hilarious. They actually have people that travel, and for their accommodations, they couch surf. Okay. Um, Basically, where they will book a spare room or literally somebody's couch in an apartment or a house. Now, if you're cool with just sleeping on somebody's couch like that, do you, okay? And I'm throwing this out there because I don't know who's listening to this podcast. And that might be you. You might be cool with, getting your trip together and just being like, hey, I'm going to stay on this couch for 2 days. I'm going to stay on this couch for 2 days. I don't know. I don't judge. Do what you do, right? And then, of course, depending on where you're going, you can always stay with family or friends. Um, Sometimes I think there's a benefit with that, but I'm going to be honest. I feel like when you stay with family and friends, it almost puts you in a position where you're kind of obligated to spend a certain amount of time with your family and friends, right? So I guess that option would really just depend on what kind of trip you're trying to have. Okay. Um, you know, if I had, and I guess it depends on the type of friend and the type of family it is, because there's some people that you can just go and chill and they're cool if you come and go. Y'all just have dinner, once or twice or something like that, or maybe hang out a day or two while you're in town. And I could see that being pretty cool. But I guess to each their own. I'm just here sharing some information that I thought y'all would find interesting. Okay. Um, the last thing, like I said, the last two are kind of near and dear to my heart. The last thing is food. Okay. food needs to be considered when you're traveling on a budget because you don't want to eat your budget. And what I mean is, you don't want to, if you can avoid it, you don't want to have to pay for every single meal, snack, and drink that you're going to need for the length of time that you're going to be gone. Because a lot of times that'll eat up your budget like that. Okay. Um, Depending on where you go, you can plan your meals, where some places you're able to cook if you've got like a little kitchenette or whatnot. Um, I mean, how many places now offer at least the little continental breakfast, where you get your little muffin or make your little waffle or whatnot. Um, and then that leaves you open for drinks and splurging on dinner. Um, you can go all inclusive if you are finding a deal on resort stays or at least places that include some meals, like breakfast, for instance. So, you've got some options to where you're not eating and drinking up your whole budget unless when you're planning your trip, you plan to eat and drink your whole budget. I don't know. So, you know, those were just a couple of little tidbits, like I said, that I thought maybe I would share since it was in my own journey that I found them. I thought maybe someone else might find them helpful or interesting. But I do want to thank you all for joining us this week on Living in Color. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes because next week we're going to talk about safe places for Black women to travel, especially if you're traveling solo. Also, while you're subscribing, if you like this episode or others, please leave a review and or tell a friend because it really helps me out. All right, guys. See you next time.